Hello, I'm Chuck Hawley, and today I'm joined by Kevin Osborne. This video is part of West Marine's Do-It-Yourself project series, and today's topic is how to improve your dock lines so that they hold your boat securely, last a long time, and look professional. Kevin, what's the preferred type of fiber for dock lines?
Well, Chuck, dock lines work best when they're made out of nylon line. Nylon is strong, elastic, and durable, all properties you want when tying up your boat. There are three main types of rope construction for dock lines: 3-strand, double braid, and mega braid, which is a single braid and is common on larger vessels.
I've always used 3-strand dock lines. What's the advantage of using double braid?
While both lines work well, double braid is somewhat stronger for a given size, has about half the stretch, and is available in many colors so you can color coordinate your dock lines to match the color of your trim or canvas.
Okay, so what's mega braid and what kind of boat might consider using it?
Mega braid is a 12-strand nylon single braid from New England Ropes. Single braids have the property of being very supple and limp, so they're easy to coil and handle. Mega braid is frequently the choice of boats above 70 feet. It's harder to splice, however, so boaters may want to order custom mega braid from West Marine Rigging. Mega braid comes in white or black.
Great, thanks Kevin. Dock lines can be broken down into two main categories: transient lines, which you take with you on your boat and use them to tie up for short periods of time, and permanent dock lines, which are intended to hold your boat securely in or slip. Trailerable boats that don't have a permanent berth may only have transient dock lines. Transient dock lines are generally purchased pre-made, with eye splices at one end and a whipped end at the other. The eye can be placed around a cleat on your boat, and the other end can be made fast to the dock, cleat, or ring. If you have someone who is unfamiliar with how to use a cleat on a dock, you can instruct them to loop the eye over the cleat, and then you can adjust the bitter end back on board.
Bow and stern lines should be about 2/3 the length of the boat, while spring lines should be as long as the boat. Spring lines are used to keep the boat parallel to the dock and are run aft from the bow to the dock. This is called an after spring, and forward from the stern to the dock. This is called a forward spring.
The basic selection rule works pretty well. On my 21-foot Zodiac, I bought 15-foot lines for the bow and stern and 20-foot lines for the spring lines, and it's perfect. Kevin, is there a similar selection rule for what the diameter of the lines should be?
We've found that the same general rule that applies to anchor lines also works well for dock lines. We recommend 1/8 inch the diameter for every 8 feet of boat length. That means that you can use a 3/8 diameter for boats to 24 feet long, and 1/2 inch diameter for boats to 32 feet long, and 5/8 diameter for boats to 40 feet long.
Once again, this rule works really well for boats I have owned, and even if your boat is shorter than 20 feet or so, 3/8 inch line is a nice size to hold and handle. Lines that are too small will stretch excessively and wear out prematurely. Lines that are too large may not fit on your cleats correctly and won't have sufficient stretch to absorb shock loads.
So let's tie up the Zodiac and see how this works in practice.
So we're going to demonstrate bringing a boat in alongside using a bow and stern line, and then an after spring and a forward spring line. We'll approach the dock at about a 30-degree angle. Pull it into neutral, turn the helm away from the dock. Coming in a little hot there. Okay, so let's start with the stern line. Full turn around the cleat, cross turn, and then a locking turn. Before the boat can move away, we'll go to the bow line. Full turn, cross turn, and a locking turn. Now this would normally be enough, but the boat has a tendency to sort of yaw around. And we don't want to pull the lines too tight because we want to keep it soft against the dock. So we use spring lines. This is actually the forward spring line. It comes from the stern and goes forward. So we'll run this here. And as I pull this tight, it makes a triangle between this and the stern line. It just sort of snugs the boat up alongside the dock. Okay, we'll do a round turn, cross turn, and then we'll twist it underneath. The one thing you don't want to do is make your locking turn. It's hard for me to do this because I've trained myself not to make your locking turn so it goes over there because it looks funny. You want a nice symmetrical look like that. And you can put on more and more if you want, but it doesn't do any good for strength. This is the way to do it. And then this is the after spring. Comes from the bow, runs down to the same cleat. In this case, I'm just going to tie on top of the other line. There, so the combination of bow lines and stern lines makes the boat very stable. It can't yaw around as much, and especially if you have surging conditions where you've got current going with you or against you, the boat won't try to get away from the dock. This technique, although we've used it with transient dock lines, is the same sort of philosophy that you'd use for permanent dock lines as well. One of the luxuries of having custom dock lines when you return to your slip is that there's no adjusting or fiddling with the lengths of the lines. You simply throw them over the cleats or bollards on your boat and you're done. Many people will just get a 3-strand pre-spliced dock line like this one. 3-strand nylon, it's got about a 12-inch eye, a 5-tuck splice, and in this case this is I think a 3/4 by 25 footer. They'll use this as their transient dock line. Or you can actually use this as the starting point to making permanent dock lines by cutting it to length and putting an eye splice in the bitter end. Now the fun part starts. We're going to splice up the dock line by making an eye splice around the thimble. The thimble is the first defense against chafe. While we can show you how to make the splice, we think it's difficult to learn how to splice using a video or a book. So we'd recommend that you find someone, perhaps an old salt, who can splice and ask them to show you in person. But here goes. So the first thing I do, we're actually using a pretty hefty thimble here. You'll notice this is 1/2-inch line and what appears to be a 5/8-inch shackle. We're going to tape the shackle or the thimble, pardon me, in place. So I just can tape all the way around the throat here. I've left about 1 foot on the bitter end. I'm going to untape this end of it and tape each of the 3 strands individually. I like using stretchy electrical tape. This is a nice 3M electrical tape which has a lot of stretch, good adhesion. Now the only difference between this splice and a normal eye splice is that you want to make sure it's tight around the thimble so the thimble can't possibly fall out. So now we unlay the line. We try to keep the strands though still looking like strands. And I always splice towards me. So I take this top strand, insert the fid like this. I'm using the larger of the 2 sizes of fids. I could also use the small version. And see, by doing this, I get the throat of the splice right up there. I move over 1 strand, take the 2nd strand, pull it through. Now I flip this over. Now you want to slow down a little bit at this point and start pulling everything so it's nice and tight. Nice and tight all the way around. And now I end up with 3 strands coming out 120 degrees apart. And now it's easy. Stick the fid through, pass the strand through, roll over, stick the fid through, pass the strand through, roll over. And each time as I do this, I'm giving the strand a little tug with my thumb. Now at this point, I want to pull all 3 strands and really tighten this down so there's no way that that thimble's ever going to come out of there. There we go, starting to look like a normal eye splice. And now it's smooth sailing from here on. Now I've heard that some people can splice as fast as other people can tie a bowline. I don't know that that's true, but you can see it really doesn't take any time at all. When you get good at it, this should take you 3 or 4 minutes. Now in this case, we're going to do a splice that we call a 5-6-7 splice. This is our 5th tuck with all 3 lines. That's the minimum necessary to get enough friction to keep the splice from pulling out. 1 final tug. Okay, now we're going to take 2 strands, and it doesn't matter which 2, and we're going to run them 1 more tuck. That's where the 6 comes in. And then we're going to take this last one and do it 1 final tuck. It's going to be actually under here 7 times. Now, before I pull it tight, see how all 3 strands, this is 5 tucks, 6 tucks, and 7 tucks, they all come out on the side, and see how the splice sort of tapers? Well, I'm going to pull these down snug. Now I'm going to run down to my local West Marine store and borrow their hot knife and just cut those off so that they're flush. One of the ways to make your dock lines last a lot longer is to use a length of chain where the dock lines attach to the dock. So in this case, we've got big 10-inch galvanized cleats. We've taken a piece of 1/4-inch chain and run it around the base of the cleat, used a standard anchor shackle. That goes through a galvanized thimble, and then we've got a splice. These lines have been in use for several years, and they show virtually no damage, except for just a little bit of chafe there where they drag on the dock. This makes an extremely durable and professional looking way to finish off your permanent dock lines, and the nice thing is they're really hard to steal. If eventually the chain wears out, just come down with a hacksaw, cut the chain, replace the piece of chain with another one.
Chafe gear comes in a few different styles. One type is the polyester woven tubing from Taylor that provides an extra layer between the line and the boat surface. For a very durable and traditional look, we like these leather chafe guards that are stitched in place with thread, which is included in the package.
These leather chafe kits can be used on a variety of applications. For example, on this Sydney 38, there's a snap hook here which is right attached to the stanchion base, and you can see how the owner has used the leather chafe kit to protect the hull from the stainless steel. That's an alternative use, and it works really well. There's no damage to the hull. If you need to include a snubber in your dock lines, now is the time to anticipate their use. You can't install a snubber over a line with a splice at both ends, so you'll need to slide it over the line now, which will also change its length. This is a common type of snubber, which stretches up to a foot or so when under strain, thereby reducing the peak loads on the line and on the cleats.
Long lengths of dock lines will probably have enough stretch to avoid the use of snubbers, but short lines that don't have an opportunity to stretch may justify a snubber. When possible, try to have some lines that attach away from your vessel to pull it off the dock. This might be a piling or an adjacent dock, or perhaps just running a bow line to a different cleat. This will reduce the demand for your fenders to protect your boat, especially if wind or chop can affect it.
So Kevin, let's summarize the points that you think are most important for people who want to improve their dock lines.
Okay, Chuck, I think there are 4 main points. First, you want to choose a quality nylon line in the correct diameter, either in braided or 3-strand construction. We always recommend using New England Ropes nylon since it's worked well for our customers for over 40 years. Second, take the time to splice your lines when possible to make the strongest and custom length lines. Third, use a connection at the dock that is chafe resistant, which also isolates a nylon line from dock hardware, possibly by using ACO chain or a galvanized thimble. And finally, protect against chafe by using chafe guards wherever lines rub against surfaces.
Thanks, Kevin. And thank you for watching. We hope we've given you some ideas on how to make up dock lines that work best for you and how to install them. Please refer to the West Marine website, www.westmarine.com, as we continue to add West Advisor do-it-yourself projects to our library. See you on the water.